Every relationship begins with fire, chemistry, desire, promise. But most relationships do not collapse because love disappears. They collapse because one silent enemy enters, unnoticed, unchallenged, and completely destructive. This is the enemy that ruins connection, destroys intimacy, and turns passion into distance. This is the truth that separates strong relationships from broken ones. The final one relationship killer is not cheating. It is not distance. It is not time. It is UN said reciprocity. Resentment is born when expectations remain silent, needs stay buried, and emotions are forced to survive without expression. At first it whispers, it's fine. Then it evolves into, you don't understand. Then it hardens into, I'm done. Strong relationships do not avoid conflict. They confront discomfort early. When communication collapses, attraction follows. When emotions are suppressed, intimacy suffocates. When comfort replaces desire, connection becomes routine instead of electric. Here is the danger. Most people do not even realize resentment is growing. They label it stress. They blame being busy. They call it a phase. But every unspoken feeling becomes emotional debt, and all debt collects. Powerful relationships are built on brutal honesty, not silent endurance. Say what you feel, name what you need. Protect your identity. Fight for the connection before loneliness replaces it. Because the moment resentment becomes normal, love begins to disappear. Unspoken expectations slowly poison even the strongest connection because they create a relationship built on assumptions instead of understanding. When expectations live only in the mind, the other person is being judged by rules they were never allowed to read. This is how frustration is born in silence. One begins to feel unseen, unvalued, and emotionally neglected. Not because care is missing, but because clarity is missing. The danger is not in having expectations. The danger is in hiding them. Most people do not express what they truly want because they fear conflict, rejection, or appearing demanding. So they choose quiet, endurance over honest conversation. They smile while feeling disappointed. They agree while feeling unheard. Over time, this emotional compromise becomes internal pressure. The mind starts collecting evidence, moments that felt unfair. Needs that went unmet, efforts that went unnoticed. None of this is shared, yet all of it is remembered. And that memory becomes resentment. Resentment is powerful because it changes perception. Once it takes hold, every action is filtered through emotional pain. A simple mistake becomes proof of neglect. A delayed message becomes evidence of indifference. Even kindness feels insufficient because the wound is already open. The tragedy is that the other person often has no idea this emotional courtroom even exists. They are unaware a silent trial has been taking place, one where the verdict has already been written. Unspoken expectations also create an invisible distance. Instead of intimacy, there is performance. Instead of connection, there is calculation. One starts behaving in ways designed to avoid disappointment rather than deepen trust. Vulnerability disappears. Honesty feels dangerous. The relationship turns into a negotiation where no one is brave enough to reveal the real terms. Eventually, the emotional weight becomes unbearable. What could have been solved with a conversation now demands a crisis. The smallest conflict triggers an explosion of stored frustration. It feels sudden, but it is not. It has been building quietly for a long time, and when everything finally spills out, it is messy, overwhelming, and often too late. The solution is not perfection. The solution is courage. The courage to speak needs before they turn into wounds. The courage to say, this matters to me, even when the voice shakes. The courage to allow disagreement in exchange for authenticity. Strong relationships are not free of conflict. They are rich in communication. When expectations are spoken, they become agreements. When needs are expressed, they become opportunities for deeper connection. When feelings are shared early, they prevent emotional damage later. What is unspoken controls the relationship. What is spoken strengthens it. Silence may feel safe, but it is the most dangerous choice of all. Emotional withdrawal is one of the most damaging patterns in any relationship because it slowly starves the connection of its most essential fuel, presence. It does not begin with distance. It begins with disappointment that is never addressed. When feelings are hurt and not expressed, the heart protects itself by pulling back. At first, the change is subtle, less sharing, less curiosity, fewer emotional risks. What once felt open and alive starts to feel careful and controlled. The connection is still there, but it is no longer being fully fed. As emotional withdrawal grows, communication becomes surface level. Conversations shift from meaningful exchange to basic logistics. What used to be a space for vulnerability becomes a space for maintenance. Laughter feels lighter. Silence feels heavier. The bond weakens not because of lack of love, but because of lack of emotional access. When someone stops bringing their inner world into the relationship slowly loses its soul. The mind justifies withdrawal as self-protection. It says, this is safer, this prevents pain, this avoids conflict, but safety built on emotional absence is not security, it is isolation. The heart was designed for connection, not emotional armor. When protection becomes the priority, intimacy becomes the casualty. Over time, emotional withdrawal creates two separate realities inside the same relationship. On the outside, everything looks stable. On the inside, one person feels alone while still being together. This loneliness is especially painful because it is invisible. There is no clear event to point to, no dramatic moment of collapse. Just a quiet fading of closeness that leaves confusion in its place. The most dangerous part is that emotional withdrawal often invites more distance in return. One person steps back to avoid being hurt. The other feels that distance and pulls away too. Neither wants to lose the connection, but both are protecting themselves from disappointment. This creates a cycle where each step back feels justified, yet each step back deepens the emotional gap. Eventually, the relationship becomes emotionally hollow. The structure remains, but the heartbeat weakens. Desire fades. Motivation to invest declines. Small problems feel heavier because there is no emotional cushion left to soften them. What once felt strong now feels fragile. The path out of emotional withdrawal is not dramatic change. Deliberate return, it requires choosing vulnerability over defense, expression over silence, presence over avoidance. It requires the courage to say, "This matters to me," even when the fear of rejection is loud. Reconnection begins the moment emotional walls start coming down. When emotional presence is restored, trust begins to heal. Intimacy returns, the relationship regains its depth, its warmth, its sense of shared reality. Emotional withdrawal weakens connection. Emotional courage rebuilds it. Communication breakdown is rarely about the absence of words. It is about the absence of understanding. People often speak, but they are not truly heard. They respond, but they are not truly listening. Over time, this creates a gap between intention and impact. What is meant with care is received with frustration. What is expressed with honesty is interpreted as criticism. And once this misalignment becomes normal, the connection starts operating on emotional noise instead of emotional clarity. Most communication collapses when fear enters the conversation. Fear of being judged, fear of being misunderstood, fear of starting conflict. To avoid discomfort, people soften their truth, hide their feelings, or speak in indirect ways. They expect the other person to read between the lines. But emotional intelligence does not come from guessing, it comes from clear expression. When messages are unclear, assumptions take control, and assumptions are the fastest way to damage trust. As the breakdown deepens, patterns begin to form. Important topics get avoided, real issues get postponed. Conversations revolve around safe subjects while deeper concerns remain buried. Eventually, unresolved emotions start leaking into every interaction. Tone becomes sharper, patience becomes thinner. Even neutral conversations feel tense because the emotional foundation is unstable. When communication fails, emotional safety disappears. Without emotional safety, honesty feels dangerous. Without honesty, intimacy becomes impossible. People start editing themselves instead of expressing themselves. They choose peace over truth, not realizing that suppressed truth will eventually destroy peace anyway. Another major problem in communication breakdown is the need to be right. When winning the argument becomes more important than understanding the person, connection suffers. The conversation turns into competition instead of collaboration. Both sides defend their position rather than explore each other's experience. In that space, nobody feels supported, only opposed. Over time, repeated misunderstandings create emotional exhaustion. Each person begins to feel that trying is pointless. They stop explaining, they stop asking, they stop caring as deeply. The silence that follows is not calm, it is resignation. The relationship still exists, but the emotional bridge between two people has collapsed. Repairing communication requires intentional effort. It demands slowing down, listening without planning a response, and choosing curiosity over defense. It means expressing feelings without accusation and receiving feedback without retreat. True communication is not about winning, it is about understanding. When communication is restored, everything else begins to heal. Trust strengthens, emotional safety returns. Problems become manageable again. What once felt impossible becomes solvable. Communication breakdown weakens relationships, but conscious communication has the power to rebuild them. Loss of identity inside a relationship happens quietly, but its impact is massive. It begins with small compromises that feel harmless at first. Personal interests get postponed. Personal goals are placed on hold. Individual boundaries soften in the name of keeping the connection smooth. Over time, the relationship becomes the center of everything, and the self slowly moves to the edges. What once felt like closeness turns into emotional dependence, and dependence is the enemy of desire. When identity weakens, attraction weakens with it. Desire thrives on individuality, confidence, and self-direction. When someone stops nurturing their own growth, the relationship loses the spark that was originally created by two whole people choosing each other. Instead of partnership, the dynamic becomes emotional merging. Instead of connection, There is quiet pressure to fill emotional gaps that no relationship alone can satisfy. The danger of losing identity is that it creates invisible resentment. When personal needs are ignored for the sake of the relationship, the heart begins to feel trapped. Sacrifice without balance becomes self-betrayal. And self-betrayal always leads to frustration. Even when the intention was love, that frustration eventually leaks out as emotional withdrawal, irritability, or loss of motivation. The relationship feels heavy because one person is no longer standing fully in themselves. Loss of identity also places unrealistic pressure on the relationship. When personal purpose fades, the relationship becomes responsible for providing meaning, happiness, excitement, and fulfillment. No connection can carry that weight for long. When the relationship becomes the only source of emotional energy, both people start feeling drained instead of inspired. Another consequence is the erosion of self-respect. When boundaries disappear, so does inner stability. Without boundaries, people lose the ability to protect their emotional space. They say yes when they mean no. They stay silent when they should speak. They adjust their personality to avoid conflict. Over time, this creates an internal split between who they are and who they present themselves to be. That internal conflict weakens confidence and clouds judgment. Rebuilding identity does not require leaving the relationship. It requires returning to the self. It means reclaiming interests, ambitions, friendships, and personal growth. It means choosing self-respect alongside love instead of sacrificing one for the other. Healthy relationships do not consume identity, they support it. When identity is strong, the relationship becomes lighter, more exciting, and more stable. Two complete individuals bring energy, direction, and purpose into the connection. Love grows not from losing oneself, but from choosing each other while standing fully in who they are. When comfort replaces desire, a relationship begins to lose its pulse. Comfort is safe, familiar. Desire is alive, magnetic, and emotionally charged. Both are important. But when comfort becomes the foundation and desire is neglected, the connection slowly drifts into emotional flatness. What once felt electric becomes routine. What once felt exciting becomes expected. The relationship continues, but the spark that made it powerful starts to fade. This shift does not happen suddenly. It develops through repetition, without renewal. The same conversations, the same patterns, the same emotional rhythms begin to dominate. Effort decreases because familiarity creates the illusion that the connection no longer needs to be nurtured. People stop surprising each other. They stop expressing appreciation with intention. They stop creating new emotional experiences together. And without new emotional energy, desire weakens. Desire thrives on presence and attention. It grows when people feel seen, chosen, and valued. When comfort takes over, attention becomes automatic instead of intentional. Small gestures disappear. Curiosity fades. The connection becomes efficient but not intimate. Emotional closeness remains, but the fire that fuels attraction struggles to survive. Another danger of excessive comfort is emotional complacency. When someone believes the relationship is secure, no matter what, motivation to grow and invest declines. This is where neglect quietly enters, not because of lack of care, but because of lack of urgency. Desire needs urgency. It needs the feeling that the connection matters enough to protect, pursue, and prioritize. As desire fades, people begin to question their feelings. They confuse emotional comfort with emotional fulfillment. They mistake stability for passion. They wonder why the relationship no longer feels the same without realizing the desire must be actively maintained. It does not survive on history alone. The relationship then risks becoming a partnership of convenience rather than a connection of passion. Emotional closeness exists, but the energy that once made the bond intoxicating is missing. Without desire, intimacy becomes mechanical. Without excitement, the connection becomes predictable. And predictability without emotional investment leads to boredom. Reigniting desire does not require dramatic change. It requires conscious effort. It requires presence, curiosity, appreciation, and the willingness to keep choosing the relationship as if it still needs to be one. It requires creating new memories, new experiences, and new emotional moments that remind both people why the connection matters. When desire is protected alongside comfort, the relationship becomes both stable and alive. Comfort provides safety. Desire provides fire. Together, they create a connection that is not only lasting, but deeply fulfilling. Fear of honest conflict destroys relationships, not because conflict itself is dangerous, but because avoidance allows small problems to grow into emotional disasters. Conflict is the language of truth. It reveals boundaries, needs, values, and emotional wounds. When conflict is avoided, those truths remain hidden, and what is hidden begins to control the relationship from the shadows. Most people avoid conflict because they fear losing connection. They fear being misunderstood, rejected, or seen differently. So they choose silence over expression and agreement over authenticity. But this false peace comes at a high cost. Every unspoken frustration becomes emotional pressure. Every unresolved issue becomes a crack in the foundation. Over time, the weight of unaddressed problems weakens the entire structure of the relationship. Avoided conflict creates emotional distance. When someone does not feel safe expressing discomfort, they stop being fully present, they hold back, they filter themselves, they protect instead of connect. The relationship may appear calm on the surface, but underneath it becomes fragile and unstable. Emotional honesty is replaced with emotional caution. Another danger of avoiding conflict is the development of emotional scripts. Instead of addressing the real issue, people rehearse arguments in their minds. They imagine conversations that never happen. They build stories around each other's actions. These internal narratives shape behavior more than reality ever could. The relationship becomes governed by assumptions rather than communication. Over time, the suppressed emotions demand release. When they finally surface, they do so with intensity. What could have been resolved with a simple conversation now becomes an emotional explosion. The argument feels overwhelming because it is carrying the weight of many unspoken moments. Both people feel attacked, misunderstood, and exhausted. Healthy conflict does not destroy connection, it strengthens it. When conflict is approached with respect and openness, it creates deeper understanding. It allows each person to feel seen and valued. It turns problems into opportunities for growth rather than threats to the relationship. Avoidance, on the other hand, slowly erodes trust and intimacy. Learning to engage in honest conflict requires courage. It requires expressing feelings without blame, listening without defense, and prioritizing understanding over winning. It means recognizing that discomfort is temporary, but unresolved pain is permanent. When fear of conflict is replaced with emotional courage, the relationship becomes stronger, safer, and more resilient. Truth deepens connection, honesty builds trust, and a relationship that can survive honest conflict is one that can survive anything. Every relationship is either growing or decaying. There is no standing still. What destroys most connections is not one big mistake. It is the slow neglect of the small things, the feelings not spoken, the conflicts avoided, the identity lost, the desire ignored, the emotions withdrawn, the communication broken. Strong relationships are not found. They are built deliberately, courageously, consistently. Speak before silence poisons. Fight for truth before comfort numbs. Protect desire before routine steals it. Choose growth before resentment decides for you. Because the hide-to-one relationship killer is not what happens between two people, it is what never gets said, never gets faced, and never gets healed. And the moment you choose awareness, you choose power over destruction, connection over collapse, and love that actually lasts.